So to begin with, without further ado, we'll go ahead and start up Xcode, create a new Xcode project right away. And we will go with a single view application. And let's see, we'll call this the Presidents. And go next, we'll just create a plain Jane app here. And create. So tonight, as I mentioned, what we're going to do is we're going to do, this will be our final week, working with table views. Can't emphasize enough how important table views are. We use them all over the place. Apple uses them all over the place. They are generally the preferred control for showing lists of stuff. So we'll do one more. We'll do this week is table views yet. I'll make an assignment after tonight. Lab 3, yay, and then we'll move on. So next week we'll start covering drawing stuff, interacting with the screen, touch events, multi-touch events, that kind of stuff, some user interaction stuff, and then we'll get on to after that we'll get into mapping and that kind of thing. So that will be our final foray into the table view world. I mean, we'll probably use them again, but tonight that'll be the main focus. We'll do some search bar stuff and WebView stuff and fun galore. So before we get started, any questions or anything pertaining to anything? Okay, I know there were some emails students I had with questions. Karen, I saw yours. I'll cover that. We'll go over. I'll talk to you about that tonight. And then any other questions and stuff that we have. I'm going to try not to go too fast. Fair amount of stuff to cover, but shouldn't be too bad because a fair amount of it's review with the table view stuff. So anyway, if there's no questions or anything before we get into it, we'll start off going to our storyboard file. And we have our generic view controller. I always like to set this to one of the phone sizes so that you have a little more accurate depiction of what it's going to look like. And then right off the bat, we can go ahead and plop a table view onto this guy. Down in our list of controls, there's our table view. Put him on here. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that you can, again, size it to make room for other stuff. I'm going to control, drag, and center it horizontally. And I think other than that, should be good to go. I'm going to come over here into my outlet inspector guy up here right away and set up my data source and my delegate to be the view controller parent. Drag on over and drop onto my view controller with both of those. So that sets up the view controller as the source of data and the delegate for the various table view methods that you have to implement. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead, just not going to mess around with them. I'm going to create an outlet right away. So with my assistant editor, and once my mouse pointer comes back, I'll get around to doing that. What happens when that happens? It's just like, seems like a relatively innocuous thing, and all of a sudden it's just gone. So anyway, okay, now that we're back, you can see a standard pattern with a lot of the Apple stuff. You do the same kind of things with different controls over and over. So I'm going to create an outlet for my table view. I'm cleverly calling it table view. All right, so now we have all the wiring set up for that. We can go ahead and start adding code in. So our view controller is going to be a UITableView data source. and a UITableView delegate. And of course, as soon as you do that every single time, it gives you an error saying, hey, there's stuff you got to implement if you want to call yourself a TableView delegate and data source. First off is the number of sections in the table view. This guy we can just hard code to 1. And then we also need to implement the table view number of rows in section. And for now, we can just say 1. And then finally, we need the cell for row index path that allows it to create cells, table view cells on the fly. And for that, I'm just going to hard code a generic table view cell by constructing one UITableView cell. Except I got my BA mixed around. There we go. All right, so now we have everything wired up for it to work. Now, up till now, what we've done is we created these dummy arrays of various things, fruits and trees and stuff like that, which is all fine. But we don't actually have a true, like a data-driven app. So what we need to do is wherever you downloaded that president list to, you need to take that guy and drag him into the project and just plop him in there. Make sure, as always, you copy items if needed, create groups, target a set, all that good stuff. Okay, so everything looking good so far? Right. Wherever you downloaded that from Blackboard, that plist from, just drag it and then drop it into the project. Anywhere is fine, as long as it's in the project folder. So that's this guy here. So plists are a handy item. Apple loves them. They use them all over the place. We use them at work quite a bit too. The plist is Apple's version of a configuration file. So for example, we've already worked with plist a little bit. The info, with every Xcode project you create, there's an info.plist. And this guy gets bundled up and sent along with your app when you publish it. And in the info.plist, which you generally don't want to mess with, but in here it has information about the product. It has the bundle identifier, executable name, launch screen, all that kind of stuff, entry point, the main storyboard entry point, device capabilities, support orientations, all that stuff is stored in this info.plist, which gets compiled and built into the app, which then gets published to Apple. And then when they get the app, they decompile a little bit of this, pull out the this information here, and then they go about the process of reviewing the app. So plists are everywhere. We're going to use this president plist. All it really is it's just an XML file. So if I go into Finder, you can see here it is over here. So it's just an XML file. That's kind of fancy. They have a fancy kind of user interface around it. So at the root level, so every plist will have a root level, which is a dictionary item. And then underneath that will be whatever data you're storing. So in our case, underneath the root level of our plist is a president's element, and it's an array. It's got 44 items which represent each one of the presidents. And if we go into each individual item is also a dictionary element. If you expand that, It'll have the name of the president and then a URL which points to a Wikipedia entry for that president. And so what we're going to do is basically build like a president info app that's going to have a list of them in order, and then it's going to allow the user to go and actually read about them in Wikipedia. So that is the president plist file. We need to load this into memory and then load these elements into our table view, and then from there we'll just have fun galore. All right, so I'll close this. So at this point we can go into the code, into the view controller code. And what we're going to do, we've done this a few times before where we've worked with the bundle. We're going to define a path within the app. The NS bundle is a static, so this is a static method we're going to call, because we don't have a bundle instance. We're just calling NS bundle that main bundle. That gets us the main application bundle, which includes that info plist I showed you. And what we want to call is path for resource. And it's the one that has the name and the of type on it. Okay, so the name is the name without the extension. So it's just the name of the file, president list, and the type is plist. Okay, so what that does is it returns the absolute path on the phone or the device to that plist. And we need that in order to open it, to actually access it. Then what we want to do is just read the contents of it. So we're going to create a dictionary, an NS dictionary. We can just call that bad boy right up. And we want to call contents of file, passing in this path that we just got. You can also create an NS dictionary from the contents of a URL. And this is going to be complaining that we need an exclamation point after path. So that's all you really need to do to read out of an XML file, because XML files are always in, and this is kind of an insight to just how ridiculously smart these people are, but an XML file is always in the format of a dictionary. It's always got a key and a value, key, value, key, value, key, value. So because of that, you can load up any XML file really by just, as long as it's valid XML, by loading an NS dictionary. All right, so what that does is that gets us the entire file, starting at the root. So when we call that, we're going to get all the way up to the root and everything underneath it. But what we really want, go back in here, what we really want is just the list of presidents, which is an array. All right, so to get that, we can say, actually, we're not going to do this. We're going to create a variable first, because we need something to hold this that we can access that has permanence. So we'll create a list of NS dictionaries. So this is an array of dictionaries. And you can just initialize that on the fly to an empty array. Okay. So then after that, we can say, we can set our president list equal to the dictionary, and this is a very useful, handy function that they have. It's called object for key. And when you call the object for key, you pass in the key name, And the key name is just going to be presidents. That is the name of the key. The value is going to be this array of presidents. So we just need to pass in that, the name of the key we're after. Oops. And the last thing we need to do is typecast that as what we're trying to get out of it. And that is an array of NS dictionaries. And it's going to want exclamation point there. And if everything is done correctly, we will have a list of presidents. So what we can do right off the bat is we can go ahead and put a breakpoint there and run it. And then you should be able to actually see the list. Of course, I should probably put that breakpoint up a little higher in case something goes wrong. Oops, not get rid of it, but. So you guys had some great questions for Patrick. That was pretty awesome. And there it is. Has anyone got theirs up to the point where it's loaded yet? Okay. So path, in this case, the path is the path of the simulator on the local drive. And the dictionary will show up as one key value pair. All right, so the key is the root, and then underneath that are the actual array of presidents. And then if we hit F6 again, presidents are all loaded. And underneath self is where the presidents is, because it's a member variable, and there are 44 values, all of them dictionaries. So it looks like that was successful. You have 0 values? That's a problem. So if you have 0 values, did the path come back with something that looked like a valid path? I'll run this again. So when you debug past the path variable, that should have something that says like users/Johnson or whatever library blah 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 blah.
And then it goes on forever with, yeah.
Yep, with a humongous GUID. So you should have that, and then if you do it again, you should have the dictionary loaded right after that. If you don't, then make sure you're calling contents of file.
How did you step over that?
Just F6. So it should say contents of file, not contents of URL. I don't even think it compiled actually if you had that. So,
Okay.
and then make sure that the type is plist and all that good stuff. But it looks like if you have a path set, then it found it. Make sure that the presidents is all lowercase because it is case sensitive. And also that it is typecast as an NS dictionary.
Oh, yours says 0. Okay. I'm just keep going.
Oh, the 0 values there, yeah. Once you have to get past that line, that actually sets it, and then once you do that, then you get 44 values.
F6.
All right. So good, good, good. Everyone got a dictionary full of presidents. All right. Okay, next thing we're going to do is, now that we have those, we have to load them into our table view. So now instead of calling number of rows returning 1, we say presidents.count. And then the other thing we want to do is up here, after we load our presidents, we want to do that register class call that we were doing before with our table view that registers the UITableView cell. And we want to make sure you call the register class for cell reuse identifier, not for header footer view. And the cell is just the standard. We're using the standard UITableView cell. We're not finding our own this time. And you have to call .self on the end of it, which specifies the type. And then we can use whatever we want. I like to use cell because it's nice and simple. So what that does is it registers the class and then tells it what type of class. In this case, the stock UITableView cell. And then when we create the UITableView cell down here, then we use that cell, that reuse identifier. So again, that's done for efficiency. The table view will only queue up or only instantiate enough cells for what's visible, and then as you scroll, it pulls more. It pulls the ones that you've already used off of its stack. All right, so down here, get rid of this guy. And table view.dq reusable cell with identifier. Again, the sensitivity, case sensitivity matters. You have to have the same case sensitivity. And I'm going to use a specialized font for this guy because we're talking about presidents, so this needs to be emphasized and bold and all that kind of good stuff. So there is a font that's all caps called DIN Condensed. There it is, DIN Condensed. Bold is the guy I'm looking for. I'm going to use that one. And you can just say cell.textLabel .font equals UI font with the name of the one I just copied, DIN Condensed Bold. Size, we'll go fairly large on it. Another thing I'm going to set on my cell while I'm at it is set the accessory type. And that is a UIView. No, we don't even need that. When you're using an enumerated type, you can just use the dot notation, and that will allow you to specify the name without having to know the UITableView accessory type, blah, 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 blah. You can just use the dot, this guy, and it knows what type it is. So disclosure indicator has that little arrow on the right-hand side of the cell, which says basically when you select the cell, something it's going to move over this way, something's going to come in, and there's going to be additional information. And then we can do our fancy thing if we say if index path mod 2 equals 0 cell dot background color, because we're going to have quite a few rows in this guy. Background color UI color dot. This is serious stuff. President's here, so we got to stick to the kind of mundane gray color. else cell dot background color equals UI color. And if you don't use the else block, if you just go with the default, what I have observed, not always, but what I have observed sometimes is because of the fact you're dequeuing cells, you might dequeue a cell that has a different background color. Something to try, actually. And then you'll see that you'll have like back-to-back gray cells because it got dequeued, and you didn't have the else block set here. And this should be indexPath.row. And then finally we have to set the actual text of it. So it is the cells.textLabel.text property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string. And we'll say indexPath.row +1. And then space. And then the name of the president, which is president's. I actually need this. I need this. President's index path. So a lot of typing here for this, but that row that gets a dictionary. So I need to go back in actually and look and see what it was called. So what we're after is the name of the president, which is just, okay, so it's just name. Name is the name of the element that we're looking for. So indexPath.row and then .object for key, and the key name is name. And I need another quote. No, nope. There. Oh, all right. Then we return that. So the string we made, we're taking the index path row number, adding 1 to it so we don't start with 0, and then space, and then the object for key of our dictionary, which is just the president dictionary in the array at that row, and we want his name. That makes sense? I'm going to run it. I'll pull this out of the way. And I can get rid of my breakpoint. And you can see that it has the name of the president, but it also has, it says optional in front of it, and the president's name is in parentheses. And my font doesn't look right either, so I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just not loaded on this computer. I should run that on my phone. I'm pretty sure that'll run fine on a device, but everyone else got theirs to load?
I just have George Washington.
Just George Washington. Anyone else have theirs load okay? With the font and everything? Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm not getting the font. I'm thinking, in this case, the font is dependent upon what's loaded on the computer, so as opposed to the device.
There's a space in your name. Is that right?
In here? Oh yeah, good call. Very good catch. That could very well be it. Yeah, sweet. All right. And so that's one thing. The other thing is the optional part where it says optional George Washington. He's an optional president. That is probably because I need to put an exclamation point. I'm guessing that I'm missing an X. The reason why it says that is because it's an optional value. And so when it unwraps it and prints it, it puts the optional keyword in there instead of just the name. Key. I might have to do a typecast here. I'm guessing at the end of all this stuff. Actually, I think if I just do as string, yeah, or just ns string, and then do this. There. Okay, so when I do that, then that gets rid of the ugly looking optional thing with the parentheses. You still just have George Washington, Trevor?
You got it?
Fix that, thanks.
Okay. Yep.
Return president's laptop. And there are a number of rows in the section.
I'll leave that up. So.
By the way, I just said super cool.
Okay, so how's everyone doing? Good? All right. I got this on a 6S Plus, which is a big phone. I changed my simulator. I'm going to run it on a 5S because I was going to bump up the size of my table, but I got to be careful because that 6S Plus is a big device. You can also set a constraint on it, but probably not really necessary. All right, yeah. So as I scroll like this, I'm whizzing through these guys. That is loading these cells like a demon in the background, reusing them. So there's like probably 8 or 9 cells that are visible. So as you scroll, then it reloads them. So I'm just going to experiment here, and I'm going to comment this out. So that it doesn't do the else calculation, and see if I get some mismatched row colors. Yeah, see there's a whole bunch of them. They all come back gray. Huh. Yeah, because it's dequeuing them, and once it sets it to gray, then it doesn't reset it to white. So that proves out the whole dequeuing thing. And we're back to normal. Okay, so that's all good. All right, so the next thing I promised I would do is we would create a web view. I think we should be okay doing that here. I think we have a good enough internet connection. We should be fine. I have noticed in the past that we ended up, when everyone did it at one time, it got kind of laggy because you're calling out, everyone's calling out to Wikipedia at the same time. But we should be all right. I don't think it'll be a problem. So what we'll do is go back to our storyboard and move this guy over, bring out the panel, the object library, and we're going to just do a generic view controller, and we're going to code this bad boy up from scratch, kind of like we did with some other stuff. None of this sissy storyboard stuff. I don't really have a preference as far as using this. Some of these things is actually easier just to code. And then you don't have the possibility of having outlet conflicts and that kind of stuff. Sometimes I'll just use Interface Builder for it. But I'll set the size to 4-inch. So that's compatible. And what we're going to do is we'll create a segue from our table view. So as they tap on one of the cells, it's going to navigate to the other view controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the table view here and come over and set my number of prototype cells to 1. That provides me the opportunity then to drag over to here, do a control drag, and create a segue. You got to make sure you have the table view cell selected or it does not work. There we go. And it's a show segue. And so that wires up those two controllers. And then when you select the segue, I give it a name. Show precedence. And then over in our destination view controller, I am going to plop a little button on there to get us back so we're not stuck there. Yeah.
Tell us how to do the linking again for dragging it over.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So what you want to do is with your table view selected, by default it doesn't create any prototype cells. So what I do is I just bump up the number of prototype cells to 1. That gives you 1. And then make sure that you have the table view cell selected in your scene. And then once you have that, you can control drag from here over to your destination view controller. And then that will create a segue for you. If you don't have the cells selected though, if you have like the table view selected, or within the cell there's a content view, if you have something other than the cell itself, it won't allow you to create that segue. Does that work for you, Nate?
I'm on here, it says show selection segue.
Yeah, just select show. So select the show segue. Okay, one other thing we are missing is we don't actually have, this guy's just a generic interface builder file right now. We need to hook that up to a view controller. So I'm going to come over here and do a new file. And I'm going to add a Cocoa Touch class iOS source file. And this guy will be the president view controller. And it's just derived from UIWebView. Just like that. And if you want to have some fun when you're creating it, you can set the language to Objective-C, and and then you can enter into the wonderful world of Objective-C. I wouldn't recommend it, but Okay, so there's that. There's our President View Controller. Last week of class, we'll probably do that. We'll probably create some Objective-C stuff. President View Controller, UI View Controller. So once you have that class created, then in your storyboard, you need to tell the interface builder that this view controller is of that type. So you go into the identity inspector, and you change this to be the newly created President View Controller, and then that wires that up. Okay, so then we'll do a couple more things, take a break. So next thing I'm going to do in my destination view controller, my President View Controller one we just created, in here, just to demo that we went to the right place, we can say self.view .background color, nice easy way, equals UI color .black, or whichever color you like. And then lastly, we need to have that button added in there. That's the launch screen. I don't want that. Launch screen, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the launch screen to you guys before, but the launch screen is the screen that comes up when you first start the app. If you're loading stuff in the background and you got to wait a little while, the launch screen is the thing that you see. So it's just blank to start with, but you can put stuff on there. For the Foot Locker app, we put the Foot Locker logo, so that's what companies typically will do. Main storyboard. So in here, I'm going to put a back button here. And as long as I got it up there, I'm going to go ahead and wire up an action on it. So I'm going to select this, and if we did everything right, it should bring up the right view controller. And I don't think it did. Nope. So close it. Sometimes second time is the charm. President View Controller, that time I figured it out. So with your source file over here on the right, if I click on my back button and control drag, I can create an outlet for it. Actually, I don't want an outlet, sorry. I'm making an action. Could make an outlet, but I'm just going to create an action. And this is a button. I'll just say go back. This is the name of my action. And then we did this once before to get rid of this guy. We can just say self .dismiss view controller animated. True and completion is null. And then that will dismiss it. So again, I set up the button, did a control drag over here to create an IV action, and then we just call self.dismiss view controller animated. That should take us back to our calling view controller. If I run it, nothing happens. That's why I didn't actually call the segue. Looks nice, but all right. So a little bit of code missing yet, but we'll call it good for now. Let's take a break, and then we can finish coding that up when we get back. Hey, Sharon. Okay. Alrighty. There we go. Yeah. And I can help you if, with that when when we're done.
Yes. Good. I have like 4 versions of it. I even emailed it to myself, and I downloaded it and it worked fine. So.
Yeah, when I try, all I get is the project file. So I don't know,
Okay.
but should be easy to correct.
Finally keeping up with you
Oh, good.
a little.
Well, just let me know if I'm going too fast. So is this your last semester, Valerie?
Yeah, it is. I don't know how anyone else is doing it, but I've got 5 classes and no other job, but I can't for some reason get resumes done. I'm just like, waiting.
Do they still have like a resume writing?
Oh yeah, I had to
thing?
take a class and stuff, and I have that done, but I don't really have anything to put on my resume until after I'm done with the semester.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't want to go up to somebody at a job fair and be like, hey, I want to work for you. And they go, well, what you got? And I go, an empty hand? I got nothing?
Here's the maps I made in class.
Yeah. I
Um,
followed along. But I will definitely be looking for work probably the day after graduating.
Well, internships are always a good way to go too. It gets you the experience you need.
Yeah. There's some that insist that you have to be in school though. I don't know which companies I was looking at, but some are like, must be enrolled in school and da-da-da-da-da.
I don't think we have that requirement. All we have is a
You
minimum.
guys don't.
Yeah, we just have a minimum requirement. I think you got to be like in your
Yeah.
second year.
Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
got figured out.
Is your thing in summer then?
Yeah, our internships are all summer internships. Yeah. Although we, if someone works out really well, like we did this, like Patrick mentioned, Katie, one of our employees, and then Lucas Newcomer, who's a guy, our Android programmer, he worked out so well that then he went back to school, and then we actually hired him part-time remotely. So he worked from home in Madison. He got like 20, 25 hours a weekend working while he was finishing up his last semester.
That's
Um,
cool.
Yeah, so they're pretty flexible that way. I mean, if someone works out well, they're willing to go. And then he actually, if you work part-time, then you actually make like what you would on an hourly rate working full-time. So it's pretty sweet because it's an hourly rate. So then it's just, it's taxed a little bit lighter, and it's not a bad deal.
You probably have deadlines for those though, don't you? Pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it's probably coming up pretty soon, yeah.
Probably coming up yesterday. Mobile marketing intern?
What's that?
Mobile marketing intern.
Oh, yeah. Yep. marketing department works very closely with us. Mobile is right now is the big thing there. It's the new thing. So they have a mobile marketing product owner they're trying to hire and an intern.
Yeah, I love that. It says experience any. Just like that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm like.
It's very friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, depending on what type of job you're going for, it helps to have like stuff on the side. Like when I interview candidates, I always ask them if they have any apps, that they can show me. So even if you have an app on a device, like it's really nice if they actually have something published in a store. That's kind of rare. So even if they have like an app on a device that they can show. So
Yeah.
probably the same is true with web. If you have like a website that you've created, probably helps.
Makes sense.
Data guys, open up a database. Hey, look at these relationships.
Ta-da! Look at this table. Yeah. God. Yeah, I just don't even run developments. I don't even have a website. I have stuff from class. That's all I can show anybody. It's just
The systems implementation project should be.
not done. Not done at all. It's March. Won't be done till May.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That'd be a pretty heavy, extensive.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Project.
But that's PHP. My Tortoise project is Angular and TypeScript. For them, 3 feet deep. They're going, oh my God, what am I just doing? Any problems? So yeah, come May.
Okay. Well, I guess we can continue on our merry way. Next thing we need to do, so we have our list of presidents. We're going to go to a second view controller. Second view controller is going to display a web page dedicated to that information about that president. So what we need to do, though, in order to accomplish that, we have to pass information to that second view controller. So I am going to create a variable up here in the president view controller called wiki page, which is a string. And then I'm also going to create a variable which is a UIWebView. Except I can't do it that way. We'll call it WebView. Variable name first. I too code in Objective-C, and it's easy to get those flip-flopped. This is a UIWebView. All right, so now we have that back in our first view controller file. We need to actually perform the action to go to the second one. So in here, we need to do our handy dandy table view did select row. Did select row and index path. And in the did select row and index path, that's where we perform our segue. So here you can say perform segue. I'm gonna spell it right. Helps if I put the self in front of it because then it helps me out. Perform segue with identifier. That is what actually performs the segue. The identifier, I think, is what we called show president, was what we called it. Was it show presidents? Yeah. This guy. Yeah, sure enough. And that would not do anything if I had left it without the S on there. Sender is us. At certain times, Swift and Objective-C are kind of like JavaScript. It's like just a little tiny error like that, and nothing happens. All right, so we have that. Then we need to tell the second view controller we need to populate that variable. So the next thing we call is prepare for segue. The prepare for segue allows us one last chance to get data set up and stuff before we go to the next view controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the destination controller. So the segue object has the destination controller in it. So we can say let pres controller equals segue dot destination view controller. Come on, as president view controller. So now that we have a handle to the controller we're going to, we also can set variables and stuff in it. So we have to figure out, there's two ways we could do this. One is we could maintain a global variable, and in the did select row at index path, we could set that variable that represents the selected index. However, TableView provides us a handy-dandy method of obtaining that. So we can say let index path equals TableView dot index for selected row. So the index path for selected row is a TableView method that will give us that index path that we need. Oh, I don't have a space. Another JavaScript-ish kind of thing there. All right, so let index path equals TableView at index path for selected row gives us that index. And then we just need the name of the president, or actually not the name of the president, but the URL. So back in our plist, that is called URL. So we can say let URL equals president's index path dot row dot object for key, and that key is URL as string. I think it'll let me do that. It's got multiple issues here. Let's see. All right. So that gets us to the URL. We get the index of the selected row, select the correct president dictionary, and then call out the URL using object for key from that dictionary. And then we can just say pres controller wiki page is equal to URL. So the prepare for segue does get called prior to the view did load of the next view controller. So that should set us up real nicely for when we transition over to the next view controller. Everyone got that so far? All right. We could debug this. I'm pretty confident it'll work. Watch, it'll probably crash now that I said that. In here, in this guy. So now we need to do some setup work. We have this UIWebView we need to create. So the UIWebView, I should probably just not gloss over this. WebView is a very powerful class. Here he is, WebView. Provides a view to embed web content. It can be attached to a window. Sent requests to load web content. This class can also be used to move back and forward in the history of web pages. So it's a pretty powerful class. UIWebView does have events that you can capture in a WebView controller. So I'm just embedding this guy. I'm actually going to create this programmatically as a variable inside a UIView controller. But if you set it up as UIWebView controller, it'll actually capture all kinds of events. For what we're doing, all we really need to do is display the web page, and we're fine. So we don't need to worry about that. But it is a UIWebView, and the UIWebView controller are pretty powerful. So anyway, without further ado, we need to create that. So when our view did load, we can say self.webview equals UIWebView. And we're going to use frame. So what we want to do, what I want to do is when we create this, let's see here, back in the main storyboard, we have our back button up here. So we want to start our web view out below that and then have it basically occupy the size of our available view space to get as much readable content as possible. So in here, we can do a CG rect, create this guy on the fly. Oops. I'll take the last one. So the X, I'm going to start him right off, just 5 pixels in from the left-hand side of the screen. We're going to create just a small gutter. Y can be 50. That'll be plenty of room for our button. The width will be there's 2 ways of doing this. I think I've showed you guys this way before, but there's also a UI screen, which is a static, if I could get this right, screen meme dot main screen. That actually gets you the entire viewable content of the main screen, because sometimes the view controller hasn't set up its view area yet, and then you can use that application frame is a little bit tricky. So I like to use bounds. We're doing the width, and we put the left-hand gutter as 5, so we'll have the overall width minus 10. And then the height will be same thing, UI screen, main screen, bounds dot height. So I'm just going to copy this and replace width with height. Minus 50. We'll go down to the bottom. And let's see what we're missing. I think I'm missing a closing parenthesis, maybe. Yeah. There. 2 parentheses to close it all off. So first one matches the CG rect parenthesis, and the second one matches the frame. Okay, then what we need to do is create a thing called an NSURL. And NSURL, as the name implies, is a URL object. We are just going to pass in a string to create it, and the string is our variable that we set, our wiki page. That sets the URL. So the sequence we're following is we create the frame for the web view, we create a URL using the string that we already set, and then we have to create what's called a request object. The request object is a NSURL request. So basically that sends off an HTTP request to a web server requesting a web page. So that, we could say let request obj equals NSURL, yes, URL request. And into that you pass the URL you just created. That creates a request obj. And then we need to, oops, we're missing an exclamation point, I'm sure, yep. Okay. Then we call the web views load request, passing in the request object. That actually performs the act of calling out with the request object and then loading it, the contents, the response object into the web view. Now, we normally would be done, except that we're doing this all programmatically. So again, as always, when you create stuff programmatically, you have to add the web view to the main view using add subview. That loads it, that adds it onto the view and actually makes it visible. So if you did everything except this, it would actually execute the load request and all that, but it would not actually show anything. All right, so if all is well, see what happens. Thomas Jefferson. Slides up okay. And not much happening. I don't know if it's just because it's slow. There is some information in my debug window. Let's see what's going on here. Still hasn't loaded. Okay. I think I know what's going on. So anyone successful in browsing to that web page? All right. I would be surprised if you were. So the reason for that, if you look in your debug output, once you got it running, it says app transport security has been blocked, clear text HTTP resource load, since it is insecure. So this is a relatively recent thing, a fun little gotcha that Apple's put out there, that they no longer allow an application, an iOS app, to make an NSURL request with an HTTP URL. That guy has an HTTP URL. So there's a way around that. Wikipedia, being like a major website, has SSL certificates for all of their pages, for their site, their main site, and everything underneath that is under the SSL, the HTTPS protocol. So what we can do, in our plist, they're all set up as HTTP URLs, but we can convert it easy enough. What we can do is we can say this. In our view did load, somewhere in here, we can say self.wikipage equals wiki page, calling itself dot string by replacing string by replacing occurrences of string. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap out HTTP for HTTPS. So the target string, which is what we're trying to replace, and we're going to replace that with HTTPS, and that will swap it out. Hopefully that'll be enough to satisfy them. And there it is.
What did I miss if I am unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional value?
That's something else.
Yes.
Where do you get it?
When I try to click on one of the names.
Oh, so when you're doing the select row,
Yeah.
that's actually really fast. He did select row at index path. Let's see. Is the name of your segue correct? Make sure that it matches what's in your storyboard, though, Valerie, so that if you go in your storyboard, the name, I would just copy it and paste it, you know, and just make sure.
Oh, that one.
That would be one thing to check. Was the did select role working before? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so did select row, that's the only thing we're doing in there is just performing the segue. And the segue itself, in the prepare for segue, if you have something wrong here, so if you get past the perform segue, then you can put a breakpoint in here and then just step into it and see what it blows up on. Everyone got their presidents showing up? Oops. You get it figured out?
I have the same problem.
It blows up at the, right in there basically at the URL.
The URL?
President's index path dot row. For USL and string.
So that's what it's saying, it's finding nil.
Yeah.
So your list is loading okay though, right? You got all these guys showing up? Yeah. All right. So then you've got your presidents are valid. You have URL is all lowercase. That needs to be lowercase. So basically, so the index path, let me just have a look and see.
Click on the arrow. Because you've got the same for wiki page, WebView, and index path no. Which is
Okay, let's see. I don't worry about it. Is that wiki page equals URL? Is URL? Well, you're blowing it before we ever get to that. So. And index path is nil. So that is the problem. We don't have Let's back up. Okay, so why don't you stop it and start it again? Let's,
It's all pretty and stuff, it doesn't say.
yeah, so go ahead and click on one.
Boink. That takes a second.
Oh, I think I see what's going on. All right. Let's see. The problem is it hasn't selected it yet because what you coded here is did deselect row.
Oh.
That's that. Yeah, I got you again. So then you did select row and then try recompiling it and running it again. Yeah, it's a real gotcha.
How many times did you?
And there you go. All right.
Thank you.
Well, it's even though I warned you, I sometimes do it myself yet. So, yeah. All right.
Oh,
Right.
fix the HTTP.
I wonder if that's what I did on my other.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and stop it. Let's go into your, sometimes if the signature isn't exactly right, you want to go ahead and try and create a whole new signature for that.
This one.
Just anywhere above or below that, leave that, so I was just going ahead and just create a new one. So it creates a round.
I just did that.
Okay.
So it looks like it thinks you have that file, so. Yeah, do it clean that once. If it still doesn't work, then I would comment on that. Just let it create a new one. Yeah, I would just do that, so comment
Yeah,
down.
I'm sure this is not
Yeah.
doing it.
Export out there.
Little bits of
Just create a whole new one. And let it create for you. This is something about it.
I just want to throw food in my face.
They would have given comments on one. Do this. Yeah. Here, do this.
Here's a browsing is more smart.
Be a lot of extra.
Better for your tablet and burning. But
So on a fun way.
Case might be my labs.
Let's see what it's getting for hands. Yeah, call this one on, go back. So it's like stop that. Like I said, going to the story. And here, find the button, or you even just select the
all day, every day.
Okay, so go to the outlets. Okay. I was remove the focus.
All those.
Right. It's got the same, I think what I was complaining about was the same, and an action out there with the same events. There you go. Yeah, that's why I gotta replace the. Yep. Yeah.
All right. Everyone got their WebView working? Okay. So I'll put this up for a vote. I was going to cover the search bar that would allow you to search presidents using the UI search bar. That's probably another 20 minutes worth, or we can quit a little bit early and you guys can have it as lab time, question time, that kind of stuff. Lab votes for lab time. All right. We'll call it. We'll call it here. We'll call it a night, and then we'll cover the search bar starting off next week, and then we'll get into drawing code. So, all right.
Do not deselect.
Yep. Words to live by. Words of wisdom.